Hello, I'm Tony Guida. This is My New York, coming to you today from the Bergino Baseball Clubhouse in Greenwich Village. The baseball season is upon us. This is the perfect time to evaluate our two teams, and Bergino is the perfect setting in which to do that. The clubhouse is a baseball gallery featuring art pieces, books, and handmade collectibles, none of which should be confused with memorabilia. This is a place where baseball lovers congregate to talk baseball. A place, as one visitor said, with the feel of Cooperstown in the heart of New York City. So let's begin our preview with the Yankees, and here to guide us is Marty Appel, former PR director of the Yankees and author of numerous Yankee books, including the bestseller Casey Stengel, Baseball's Greatest Character. Hello, Marty. Good to see you.
Tony, thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
We have heard so much about the strength, the power, of what people think is the invincibility of this team. Are there any weaknesses? Do you see weaknesses there that perhaps we're missing?
Maybe in the team's depth. I mean, but if they play up to expectations, we're on the verge of a historic Yankee season, of which there have been a number over the years. But to see the potential in this everyday lineup and the number of home runs that could be hit, it's like, what a wow factor going into the season. Of course, you got to play the games.
Yeah, you got to play the games, and people have to stay healthy. I'm thinking of the pitching staff, the starting pitchers. The bullpen looks solid. The batting lineup is incredible. The defense is quite good. But Brian Cashman, GM, has said he'd like to find another starter. He doesn't seem to be in a rush. What does that tell you?
You always want to have 5 aces available, as the Mets may, if those guys reach their potential. You go into the season with Severino and Sabathia and Sonny Gray, who needs to pitch a little quicker. He's very slow on the mound. Jordan Montgomery, in a quiet way, had one of the big Yankee rookie starting pitcher seasons last year. And of course, Tanaka. There aren't many teams that have 5 guys all better than that. It's a rare luxury to have 5 aces. So I like what they have going in, and if they pick up somebody along the way to become a more able 5th starter, so be it. But I'm comfortable with what they have right now.
Before we look at some individual players, Aaron Boone, rookie manager, never been a coach or a manager before. Is he in a spot where he has got to produce a team that at least makes it into the World Series, or his freshman year is considered a failure?
Right. He has to make it into the World Series. I mean, they came within 1 game last year, and they discharged their manager. So the expectation is World Series this year, and anything short of that, unless it can be blamed on devastating injuries, is going to be a grave disappointment.
Boone, from what we know from the broadcast booth, is relaxed, is knowledgeable, is a guy who's been around the game a long time, but yet managing in New York in that spotlight with that kind of pressure on him, I guess we have to guess and speculate. Is he up to it?
Well, it remains to be seen. The job is so difficult in this day and age. When I'm asked who is the best manager in Yankee history, and you're talking about Miller Huggins and Joe McCarthy and Casey Stengel, I say Joe Torre. And the reason is Joe Torre had to beat 13 opponents to win his pennant, had to win 3 rounds in the postseason to win a world championship, had the most demanding boss there ever was in sports, whereas Stengel, McCarthy, and Huggins had benign leadership that really never bothered them. Torre had the second guessing of sports talk radio and all the bloggers and webcast people that were, involved around the team. The pressure was enormous on Torre, And he won 4 World Series in his first 5 years, which was pretty close to equal what Casey Stengel went to the Hall of Fame for with 5 straight. So Torrey, I think, is the standard, and that's what Aaron Boone is going to have to be measured against.
It's a tough act to follow.
Yes.
Especially for a guy who's doing it for the first time. As it's clear from what you just said, you know the Yankee history pretty well. Even though they haven't played yet, can we compare this team, or can you see parallels between this team and some of the great Yankee powerhouse teams of the past?
Absolutely, and that's what makes the anticipation of this season so great. When Ruth and Gehrig were hitting all their home runs, the number 3 power hitter on the team was Tony Lazzari, who hit 18, which was 3rd in the league, not just on the team.
Yeah, 18 in those days was a lot.
Especially for a second baseman.
Yeah.
When Mantle and Maris were hitting all their home runs in that thrilling summer of 1961, Moose Skowron was 3rd with 28. This year, assuming Stanton and Judge hit 100 or more, you've got Bird and Sanchez capable, let's say, of 40 each. I mean, it's astronomical what we're thinking of here with the power of this team. And I hate all the strikeouts that occur along with it, but they put up all these runs on the scoreboard. That's really what the game is all about, and you have to endure the strikeouts.
In many ways, that's what the game has become. And I think to its detriment in some regard. Home runs, strikeouts, walks. Not a lot of action. I mean, except when the ball goes over the fence.
Yeah.
And you see that across baseball. Not so much with a team like the Astros, which was a put the ball in play team and hit a home run when they, opportunistically. I don't know. What do you think of the style of baseball that has prevailed?
Well, I preferred the old style, even as a strategist. When you put the ball in play, good things could happen. And when you're striking out all the time, nothing good could come of that. So I like when the ball is put in play, you got a chance for an error, you got a chance to advance runners, but that's not the way the Yankees are playing the game these days, or others.
No. All right, let's go to some of the players. We'll go around the infield. First base, Greg Bird, pretty good on defense. He's got some holes on offense. Struggled a little last year, but, hope springs eternal.
We really haven't seen a full season's worth of Greg Bird at a major league level. The potential is enormous. He looked great when he came back at the end of last season, but it's a question mark, clearly.
Second base, you picked up a veteran, a pro, a very more than capable, terrific second baseman, Neil Walker, switch hitter. Doesn't have the lateral range he used to have, but he's got everything else. He's got this. He's he can hit, and he really anchors that infield, I think.
Yeah, there's no question marks around him. A veteran player, you kind of know what he's going to give you for the season. So that was a great pickup for the Yankees.
Didi Gregorius at short. What can you say? The guy does everything.
He gets better every year. He's a great presence in the clubhouse. And sometimes you watch a Didi Gregorius game and you say, tell me again how Jeter was much better than this. I'm not sure that's the case.
Yeah, that's interesting. Third base, they got this new kid while they wait for some prospects to come up.
Yeah, Brandon Drury. I'm not that familiar with him. I'm anxious to see him play. Brian Cashman has made some good moves over the years. Gregorius might have been his best, and maybe this is in the spirit of that. Again, that's show us what you can do in the big city.
Right field, there's a guy, his name escapes me, there's a incredible Aaron Judge.
Aaron Judge.
And the Judge's chambers out there.
The most impressive thing about Judge last year was that after the All-Star game, it kind of looked like the pitchers had figured him out. And he went into this prolonged slump, and we thought maybe this was a flash-in-the-pan situation. But then he, in turn, figured out the pitchers and how they were pitching to him, and he finished very strong, and he finished terrific. So you don't see that very often, and I was delighted to see that. I think he is absolutely the real deal.
Centerfield, you got Hicks, Aaron Hicks. What do you know about him?
Cashman, very high on him. He had a disappointing first season in 2016. Then last year, he really showed flashes of major league brilliance. So I think the job is his unless something happens. And if something happens, they have Jacoby Ellsbury to turn to, which is not a bad alternative.
No. In fact, you've got a crowded outfield. You had like 5 guys when I counted. Left field, I imagine Stanton will see some time out there on defense, but Giancarlo will also DH a lot, and you got Brett Gardner, solid, fast.
Gardner's old school. He's the senior player on the team, which is kind of remarkable. Right. One of the few that played in the old Yankee Stadium across the street. His first few years, I thought of him as a good 4th outfielder, and maybe not a championship player. But his maturity over the years into a team leader, into a productive, even power-hitting outfielder, has changed my mind on him. I think he's a genuine Yankee for the ages.
Catcher Gary Sanchez, there are question marks about his defense. Yes. None about his offense is bad. He could hit 40 home runs. What has he got to do to end the pass balls and I was going to say to stop going to the mound as often as he does, but they put in a rule about that.
Right. Yeah, his defense needs work. It was evident just watching the game. So many balls got past him, and he just didn't seem to have the confidence that a catcher needs to just command the game from behind home plate. But he's still young. I mean, last year was his first full season. The Yankees coaching staff obviously working with him. So I see just great things from Sanchez.
Well, it's a remarkable, powerful-looking team. They're going to get some fight from the Red Sox. Yep. I don't think the Red Sox are equal to them, but there's always the Astros in the American League, the champion.
Absolutely, and you know what? I don't want to win the pennant by 35 games. I would love a great pennant race and some exciting September baseball, and I'll be a happy guy.
Marty, thanks for your expertise. It's good to see you. And we will take a look at the Mets next. Time to examine the Mets, and here to help me do that is veteran sports journalist Anthony McCarron. He was on the baseball beat for the Daily News for 16 years. Now he's a freelance writer and contributor to SNY. Good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
The 800-pound gorilla in the room for the Mets, I would say, is health. Injuries were the story last year. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a huge deal for the Mets, obviously. I think their fans are conditioned to dread, everything pretty much out there, including minor spring training injuries that are something that are, likely to clear up in a few days. They always think the worst, and who can blame them, really, because of the way things have gone there. The prize of this Mets team is their starting rotation, and there are health questions about at least 3 of them going into the season. And, so as all the potential they have is still, there's always that caveat there. Will they be healthy? Will everything be okay? Can they last the season?
Are they cursed, Anthony? I mean, here you just talked about the starting rotation. They made what I thought was a good signing in the wintertime, a 2-year deal with a lefty pitcher named Jason Vargas to protect them against injury. And what happens?
Well, he gets hit on the hand by a line drive. He suffers a broken, non-pitching hand, but a broken bone in the hand nonetheless, required surgery. And so you see that your insurance policy is really a necessary thing. I mean, let's face it, no team gets through a season with 5 starters. We like to think that teams are in great shape when they have 5 decent starters at the beginning of the year, but they need inventory too. So that's what Sandy Alderson did by bringing in Jason Vargas. The optics are a little weird because he's the guy who gets hurt, but now it gives us a chance to at least maybe see the 5 aces, the 5 young studs that the Mets have been building their entire team around for the last 5, 6, 7 years, all in the rotation at the same time for the first time ever. The Mets realize that they've had a problem with injuries too because they revamped the entire medical department over the off season. They're being more forthcoming at times with injuries. They put out to the media a daily injury report about what each guy who's got a problem is doing and where he's at in his rehab. And I think that's all good things going forward. Sometimes injuries happen. Pitchers break. It's one of the rules of baseball. And you got to be lucky sometimes to get through with your main guys unscathed. And we'll see if the Mets can do it.
The 5 starters, the 5 aces that Mets fans are hoping will be there most of the season. DeGrom, Syndergaard, Matz, Wheeler, and of course Matt Harvey. You said 3 of them, there are question marks about them in terms of health. That's Harvey, Matz, and Wheeler, right?
Yes, and then even you can throw Syndergaard into that too because he missed much of last season with the lat muscle after the whole controversy of him not getting in the MRI tube when the Mets wanted him to, and all of that whole nonsense there, which all adds to the sort of climate of injury around the Mets. But if these guys can stay healthy, it'll give the Mets fans a glimpse of something that they've dreamed about for a long time. It may not be the same thing as it was before when they were all healthy, young studs coming up, all throwing 99 and above. Some of them are compromised now. I don't think Matt Harvey is ever going to be the Dark Knight again, but he could still be a serviceable number 3 pitcher in the big league.
That's a good point. I mean, I think Mets fans used to seeing this guy, so used to seeing this guy as the quote-unquote Dark Knight, haven't come to accept the fact he's never going to be that again. And the question is, what is he going to be in this, his, what do they call it, walk year?
Right, right.
He's a free agent after this year.
Right, and if we're ever going to see something out of him, this is the year. Because let's be frank, agents set up their clients to think about their free agent year as soon as they sign their first contract. That's when you're going to cash in. If you've put in your work and put up your resume, going forward, you're going to get, that's a big payday now. Well, injuries and ineffectiveness and some other off-the-field stuff where Matt Harvey hasn't shown up a couple times, that has hurt his ability to get a monster free agent contract. However, if he pitches great this year and does well, keeps his nose clean and all that sort of stuff, he could be in for a nice payday at the end of the year. And so I think he's focused on that. Over the offseason, we didn't see him in the gossip columns the way we had earlier in his career when he seemed to enjoy the New York nightlife and being kind of a man about town and that sort of thing. Yeah. That didn't really happen this year. So I think he's really focused on performing this year. We'll see if he can do it, but he's more removed from the 2 injuries that required surgery for him. He's further along in his career. He has a little more experience. So maybe this is the year he can put something together, get a nice payday, and the Mets can benefit from a good year from the number 3 pitcher.
DeGrom and Thor, Noah Syndergaard, have looked tremendous, and one hopes that that will continue.
If healthy, those 2 guys are as good, if not better, than any 1-2 punch in the major leagues. The only tandem I think is better is Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg in Washington. And I think DeGrom and Thor, of course, you always have to say if healthy with the Met pitchers, as we've said. But if those 2 guys are fine, I think they're right up there. They're Cy Young contenders going forward here. DeGrom looks great. He had a little back issue during camp that seems to have cleared up and not been a problem. He's looked spectacular in his start. Syndergaard came out in his first spring start throwing 101. There's a little bit of a panic about that. He's throwing too hard. It's too early. But he actually looked free and easy doing that, and he's carried that through. He seems convinced that he's going to have a big year too, which I think is a big part of his whole swagger.
The final 2 of the 5 aces, so to speak, Matz and Wheeler. With Matz, it seems to be, he's had injury issues, but there also seems to be a confidence factor with him. He seems to lose confidence in conviction in the pitch he's throwing.
That's something that Mickey Callaway has talked about with him. And
the new manager.
Yes, maybe we saw a little bit of that early in camp where he had some problems on the mound, didn't pitch very well, and conviction was an issue. If you don't believe in the pitch that you're about to throw, it loses its effectiveness pretty quickly. So even if you're convinced that your 4th best pitch is going to be great on this throw, then that's okay, throw it. But even if your best pitch is something you're like, this is not really the situation here, then you're not buying it your own
Right.
self. So how are you going to fool the hitter with it? But beyond that, though, I think Matz is set up nicely as long as he's healthy again. Toward the middle and toward the end of spring, he looked dynamite, had a great start against the Astros with the defending World Series
Right.
champions, the best offense in baseball, against a pretty representative Houston lineup, and he did very well against them. So if he's healthy, I think he's got a nice season coming too.
And briefly, Wheeler, sometimes I get the sense he doesn't know where it's going when he throws it.
Right, it's part of his charm too, actually, because nobody knows where it's going, and his stuff moves all over the place, and it's crazy, and he throws really hard. He's another guy who's trying to rebuild a career that's been really derailed by injuries. He was a little miffed when Jason Vargas was signed during camp,
right?
And because I think he wanted one of those spots. He's pitched well. He did pitch well in camp, so I think he maybe that gave him a little boost. I don't know, and if it needed that and it helps, then so be it.
We'll come back to the pitching in terms of the bullpen in a minute, but I want to look at some of the lineup. The key guy is Cespedes, and wrist issue, health again, but he has got to have a monster year, right?
Yes, and he's got to stay on the field. I feel like I'm repeating myself along those lines with the Mets,
Yeah,
but
they all have to
there
stay.
it is. Like, let's get it on the table. He's got to stay on the field. He played half a year last year. That's not going to do it. And the Mets really need him in the middle of that lineup, and he is a potent offensive force when he's there. Now, I am a little worried about a little wrist issue. The Mets let him play through it at first, and then he got a cortisone shot during camp. That's not great. Sit down your best offensive player when he's hurting in spring training. Nobody cares about the Grapefruit League. And, so we'll see if they handle him any differently during the regular season if something comes up.
You always wonder about a slugger and a wrist.
Yes, it lingers. It can linger.
Yeah.
So, but when he's right, I mean, he is so much fun to watch. I mean, the amazing raw power, raw athleticism there. I mean, him in that lineup is a beautiful thing.
Let's go around the infield. First base, they're trying a reclamation project with Gonzalez. What do you think?
Well, it's amazing how first base went from Ken Dom Smith sees first base to, yes,
the rookie.
Adrian Gonzalez is their first baseman. Dom Smith didn't particularly impress last year, got himself in shape over the winter and then got hurt in camp, and it took him a long time to heal.
Gonzalez has back issues, chronic.
Yes, from last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
well,
could be a
maybe
problem.
not chronic, but certainly from last year.
Right. I mean, but if he's himself, he was obviously an all-star caliber player for many years. Dodgers and a terrific player. Might provide a little veteran leadership as well, perhaps at first. So we'll see. I mean, he's no sure thing, though. I thought the Mets actually should have looked to. They have a few other options there. Maybe Wilmer Flores gets a little first base action against left-handed pitching because he hits lefties so well. But they could have maybe used some insurance at that position as well when Dom Smith went down.
Second base seems to be solid with Asdrubal Cabrera. Shortstop is interesting. The kid, so much flash on his defense, hasn't figured it out at the plate yet. Ahmed Rosario.
Yes, huge storyline to me of the Mets season and of the Mets franchise going forward on offense and defense, because this guy's a wonderful prospect. Now, was he phenomenal last year when he came up and had a chance to play? Not really. No. But, he does not walk. The Mets like walks. They like on-base percentage. Everybody's crazy about on-base percentage, but he doesn't do it. So hopefully his plate approach will mature going forward here. But he does have a live bat. I think he can be an offensive contributor. He's certainly going to improve the range over last year at short, not only from before when he was on the team. I think he's an improvement there, but he had some defensive hiccups too. I just think getting older, a little more experience in the big leagues, knowing what's expected of him and what's hoped for him really will help him this year. But if he has a big year, I mean, what a huge thing for the Mets that would be all across the board.
Third base, Todd Frazier, veteran pro. I really thought that was a great signing. Really anchors third base for the first time in a long time.
Yes. Great power there, obviously, with Frazier. He's had a 40 home run season in his career, and he can hit the ball out of the ballpark there. And the Mets are actually a pretty decent home run hitting team, tied for the National League lead last year. And they even traded a bunch of their power hitters during the season, so that's how reliant they were on the long ball.
And a good glove.
Yes, I think
reliable glove.
Yes, I think he's an underrated third baseman. I think he's very good there. The Mets for a long time de-emphasized defense in favor of offensive players. Yeah. It didn't
I
really
never
work.
liked that.
Right, especially with a team that's allegedly built around their starting pitching. You want some gloves out there. And I think Frazier solidifies that spot.
Right field, Jay Bruce, veteran, he's back. That should be fine. Center field is open a little bit in the sense that Michael Conforto, the rookie from last year, is still hurt, rehabbing, and I guess Brandon Nimmo gets the start. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into spring training, the Mets were hoping or that they thought that Juan Lagares was going to be the center fielder, at least while Conforto continued healing from his injury last year. Now, Lagares changed his swing, trying to incorporate the newfangled launch angle craze into it and maybe get a little more power. He hasn't been great. It hasn't worked out great so far.
One of the great defensive center fielders I've ever seen, Lagares, but he just can't hit.
And Nimmo just keeps getting on base. He keeps getting his opportunities. He keeps getting on base. Everybody looks at him, and I think they underestimate him all the time, and they think, he's all right, whatever, Brandon Nimmo. But he really, he's got an infectious smile. I think that's a good part of his game too, believe it or not. And he can run around out there. He's patient at the plate, works counts, gets on base, gets some hits. He may have forced himself at least into a platoon to start the season.
Catching, they seem to be, at least at this point, happy with both guys. And I'm not sure I like that, but we don't have a lot of time left. Give me just a thumbnail view of what you think of the catching situation.
I think a lot of Met fans agree with you that they don't like the two of them back there because there was a lot of screaming for Jonathan Lucroy to be signed as a free agent and other options at catcher as well. Travis d'Arnaud and Kevin Plawecki played really well toward the end of last season, and they gave the Mets at least the excuse to say, these are our guys, look at how they played last year. We believe that's what they are, as opposed to before.
I think it's a real weakness.
It is possibly a weakness, although Plawecki he took a little charge in camp. He was hitting better, catching well, and there was a lot of talk during spring training about him taking away playing time from d'Arnaud, which would be interesting because the Mets always felt like Plawecki would eventually hit and that he would be a solid defensive catcher. So maybe his bat is catching up now.
The bullpen is, maybe not, but it would need to go to the big question. Is this a team that can be in the postseason, in your view?
Yes, but.
Yes.
Health has to be health has to be supreme here.
But it's all got to. In other words, everything's got to work.
Yeah.
And then maybe they get a wild card because Washington wins the East.
I think that they're clearly better than the Mets. They will win the division, the Nationals. But I think the Mets can take a wild card. And then after that, who the heck knows what can happen? Especially with a pitching staff like that. If they are pitching well and they are healthy, and you're deploying Syndergaard and DeGrom in the front of playoff series, that's a scary proposition, regardless of what the rest of the roster has.
Anthony McCarron, we miss you in the Daily News, but it's great to talk to you. Great to have your insights. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Tony. Thanks for having me.
And for you, let's go Mets, let's go Yankees. See you next time.